Okay, so I think we're going to get started. E te ti, e te tā, ngā kārangaranga nui. O te motu, tēnei rā, te mihi kia koutou katoa kua hui hui mai nei. Mō tēnei kaupapa hira hira, tēnei kaupapa nui. Yeah, nō reira, tēnā tātou ko tai mai nei, ipurangi. Kia ora and good morning. Summer greetings, Happy New Year's to everyone that's come this morning for what we think is a pretty exciting subject. So this is the webinar for the official Kiwi Space Activator. And I can see a lot of familiar names, I think, in the webinar. Many of you will be, unfortunately, familiar with my face, familiar with my voice. But it's really exciting for us as a space agency that we see a lot of people that we're unfamiliar with, a lot of new companies that we haven't really interacted with. So it's fantastic to see, I guess, sort of for us to have a better and broader understanding of those that are working in the space sector. So just to kick things off, my name is Waini Hakaraia. He uri tēnei no Ngāti Rau kua te au ki te tonga, Ngāti Whakaue, te aroa waka, e whakapāho atu nei. I'm a senior policy advisor here at the New Zealand Space Agency. And we've got a few others in the room, but yeah, I'm forced to do the talking for most of today. But I'll also swing it over to my boss as well.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Andrew Johnson. I'm the Deputy Head of the New Zealand Space Agency. Great to see such a large turnout today. I'm going to come back in a minute or so, give a bit of an overview, but I think Waini, first of all, is going to lay out the agenda for today.
Thanks, boss. So today, what we're going to be talking about. So we'll give you an overview, the objectives that we're sort of seeking with the Kiwi Space Activator, sort of the what, the how, the who. We'll briefly touch on the government challenges. I believe we have a few of our cross-agency friends on this call as well. So if you are here, maybe give a hey and hello in the chat, and they'll be the best people to answer questions about certain challenges that don't sit with the space agency, but sit with the other government agencies, which we will talk about a little bit later. Yeah, we'll talk about the application process, the timelines, and I guess what we'll sort of explain about how to do, I guess, a real banging application form and the things that we're looking for. And hopefully the second half of the presentation, it will be a Q&A session for everybody. So please use the chat function at the end of the presentation to throw out those questions that I'm sure you're dying to ask. We have received a lot of questions over the last couple of weeks from many of you, which has been really, really helpful in sort of guiding our thinking. We've done our best to incorporate answering those questions within the presentation itself. But yeah, so if everyone's cool with that, we'll kick it off with the program overview, and I'm going to pass it back to Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Waini. So I'll just give a brief overview of where this sort of all sits with what we are trying to achieve in general here at the Space Agency, consistent with the New Zealand Space and Advanced Aviation Strategy. So as I'm sure many of you will know, it's an expensive and risky proposition taking space technologies from an idea to a commercial reality. Those ideas are often facing high costs, lots of uncertainty, complex interactions with multiple other parties. And we also know that a really key marker of proximity to making a commercial enterprise is getting some flight heritage, getting technology on orbit, which is an important demonstration for both investors, prospective investors and customers that there's something viable there. So the Kiwi Space Activator is all about addressing, or at least partially addressing, some of those challenges. I should emphasize it's a pilot. We only have a small amount of money, time limited at the moment, to implement this, but we hope that if a successful scheme can be demonstrated, that is actually giving support for something on a more permanent basis. Of course, there's no guarantee of that, but a pilot would certainly help build the evidence. There's really close alignment between this initiative and the strategy. So those of you who've studied it carefully will know that one of the objectives in the Space and Advanced Aviation Strategy talks about developing a national space mission. We see this as a first step towards a national space mission. On the one hand, it gives the opportunity for New Zealand companies to have put their technology on orbit and get that much closer to offering a viable product, meaning that they're in a good position to be potential suppliers into that mission. And as I'll mention in a second, is also bringing in some of our colleagues from other government agencies to see what New Zealand is capable of producing and what the connection might be to some of the challenges they face. So we feel it's a useful step forward on both the supply side, the technologies coming forward to the market, and also the demand side, given that the National Space Mission will probably have a government customer as a key feature and anchor customer. So just on that government sector collaboration, you would have seen that several government agencies have set out challenges that are, each proposal should be ideally aiming to address. There's 5 of those across different government agencies. And it means that we've got some good buy-in from our colleagues across Wellington to have a look at what these technologies could produce. Do need to emphasise that there is no guarantee that this will ultimately lead on to a national mission in any one of those areas. Obviously, something like that will be in many orders of magnitude greater in terms of the financial resources. So apart from anything else, that would need to be secured. But what we do have is interest from our colleagues to see what's possible, which we think is a good opportunity in itself. But just to emphasise that the success with one or more of these technologies through this program doesn't lead directly to an operational mission. So I think that's probably all I wanted to do, just to sort of set the overall strategic context. And then I'll hand back to Juani to talk about the details of the KSA and a bit more. Cheers.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so moving on to the what and the how. So the Kiwi Space Activator offers up to $600,000 per project. And it's all about helping innovators and researchers and companies demonstrate their technology on orbit or at a high altitude. And then so we have enough for a minimum of 3 projects. So we have a minimum of 3 projects. And when I say that, it means that, we wanted to consider other platforms like those that we develop here in New Zealand beyond sort of just going straight to orbit. So we imagine that, there might be applications that have smaller cost for the launch and things like that. So again, it is up to 600K, and we imagine that probably you're going to request the whole 600K amount, which is totally fine. But it just means that we'll have a minimum of 3 projects. So how it works is applicants, it's your choice about what spacecraft you fly with. It's your choice about what launch provider you go with. We don't have any specifics around the payload mass, volume, as long as it's sort of fitting within the funding envelope. It is totally up to you. We'll sort of get to the, I guess, how we assess. We would like to see you obviously demonstrate on a New Zealand platform for obvious reasons. But again, we haven't ruled out overseas, and it's absolutely fine to go on a platform, whatever you choose. So again, Andrew talked about this being a pilot. We've never done anything like this before at the Space Agency or the New Zealand government. So we are keen on trying a couple of different methods to see what demand that produces, to see what capabilities we have. So because of this, we've gone with 2 rounds, 2 slightly different rounds. So round 1, which is currently open and closing on the 1st of March. is really about eliminating that barrier to the flight. And the way that we think about it is that round one is about helping you guys from the signing of the launch contract and on from that. We also have a minimum requirement of a co-funding level of 30%. And unlike other sort of funds that MB administers, this has to be cash only. So we can't have in-kind contribution for that first round. So that second round, however, is, I guess, a little bit more broad, a little bit more open. So it's not just necessarily about what happens after you sign that contract with a launcher and then going from there. It's a more broad and, I guess, holistic view of the development of your project. The funding is still the same, and the minimum requirement is also 30% of the whole project. But round two will consider in-kind contributions as co-funding. So just talking a little bit more about that co-funding, and again, going back to those objectives about assisting with the commercialization element of space technologies, cash is king, let's say, in terms of how you will be assessed, how we will see the strength of your co-funding, how we will see, I guess, the confidence in commercialization that you have. I suppose cash says a lot more than potentially in kind. Yeah. So what does it cover? So costs on this list will not be eligible if they're already being covered by another entity. For example, for example, through another funding agreement, while flight operations will be funded, general science operations beyond the production of commercial data product will not be funded through this scheme. Additionally, applicants' overheads of staff is not covered by by round one, but it's something that we would consider in round two. So for space-based demonstration, operational costs of up to a year following the launch of the satellite can be included in what is funded. So again, sort of looking at the slide there, you can sort of see the things that I guess would come out for round one, the things that would come out from sort of signing on the dot for a launch, for a launch of a payload. So that's the integration, that's the qualification, the logistics of getting your payload to wherever it needs to go, but it also means the logistics of getting you there as well. So so your flights and accommodation would be included in that round one cost, and the ground operator that you might need to contract, and getting that spectrum license as well. So I know that there's one person on this call that I might have told different advice to. Again, you really pushed us with these questions and made us have to think really hard. So this is we've sort of landed, and so with round two, again, it's a little bit more broad. You can see it's the prototyping, it's the testing, it's sort of activities, I guess, that happen before the launch. And again, round one is intended to support those who are really ready to go kind of now. And round two, again, is more fostering of those ideas, and go from there. So who's it for? So you have to be a New Zealand-based legal entity, or a consortium led by a New Zealand entity. But again, of course, this is about helping our domestic space sector. You have to show us that you have a pathway, that you have intentions, that you have a plan to commercialize and operationalize your technology. And again, going back to those minimum co-funding amounts for both rounds, round one being cash only, minimum co-funding levels of 30%, and round two being co-funding levels of 30%, both cash and in-kind. We should say that having more co-funding obviously is always going to be a good thing, and more is more in this sense, I suppose. So moving on to the government challenges. So again, this initiative has been born from the Space and Advanced Aviation Strategy. And I don't know if you heard the minister's speech at the last year's Aerospace Summit, but we sort of have been working on all of the different objectives that underpin the strategy, that overall mission of doubling the size of the sector. And this initiative is about moving towards that national mission, moving towards that developing sovereign capability. So the New Zealand Space Agency, we're very, very keen on seeing the development of the sector, of course. But we need a partner. We need to look beyond just what we're doing to other government departments and reach out to them and ask them what they need from potential space technologies or what they could. Because we have real problems. Well, everyone has real problems, I suppose. But we want to see the New Zealand government being more of a customer to the domestic space sector, and not just, I suppose, providing grants. Those grants are great. So starting off is the Marine Security Oversight Committee. So that's an organization that has 11 agencies. So they are inviting innovators to participate in the Maritime Intelligence Challenge to enhance maritime domain awareness across New Zealand's vast maritime area of interest. So selected solutions will be trialed in operational environments to test their effectiveness in supporting marine domain awareness activities to combat the 19 threats/interests identified in the New Zealand Maritime Security Strategy. I don't have that strategy on hand, but if you're going for the Maritime Intelligence Challenge, please have a look at that and have a look at those 19 threats and interests. And I'm not sure if there's anyone from the Maritime Security Committee on this call. There might be, there might not be, but you can always put a question into the chat. Even if we can't answer it now, we'll come back to you. So the 19 threats include the prevention of prohibited imports, illegal fishing, environmental protection, and search and rescue coordination. So that's the first one. So the second one is from the Ministry for Primary Industries. They invite innovators to participate in the Forestry Biosecurity Intelligence Challenge. So this challenge aims to support early detection of diseases threatening New Zealand's forestry estate. So climate change is increasing the risk of new pests and diseases. Remote sensing presents an opportunity to detect foliage diseases such as needlecast and other things at scale. Where ground-based monitoring is impractical due to forest size or location, early detection can support forest management, risk mitigation, analysis of disease spread. So selected solutions will be tried in operational environments to assess their effectiveness, including how early disease can be detected compared to visual inspection. And I know that the forestry crew are on this course. So again, if you have any questions, please chuck them into the chat and they'll be able to hopefully answer them, or we can always get back to you if we can't immediately answer you straight away. Right, so the third challenge is presented by the New Zealand Defence Force. So they're inviting innovators to participate in the On-Orbit Space Situation Awareness Challenge. So space is becoming more contested. This trend increases the risk of undesirable events, either deliberate or accident, that could negatively impact the space-based services upon which New Zealand society and economic well-being relies. So New Zealand requires the means to monitor on-orbit activities that may affect those critical services, including tracking, inspection, and assessment of orbital objects. So that's number 3. Again, any questions, let us know, and we can pass them on with the defence crew out here. So fourth is presented by the Department of Conservation. who invite innovators to participate in the Ecosystem Health and Function Challenge. So selected solutions will develop novel sensors and methods of monitoring and or enhancing their understanding of ecosystem, environmental health, and or inform understanding of biophysical functions and processes. Monitoring solutions should aim to be operationally viable and deployable at a national scale in potential future use cases. Conversely, projects that address biophysical function process should address poorly constrained and significant knowledge gaps. So solutions should focus on developing novel capabilities that exceed currently available satellite datasets in spatial, spectral, and temporal solutions, and thus provide a greater insight than what is currently available. So yeah, so I think I saw the doc crew online as well, so I'm sure they're happy to take any questions. And so the last one is our one. So it's a bit of a wider sort of catch-all thing. So we're inviting you to participate in the Novel Space Component Challenge. So it's a national initiative to accelerate the maturity of space technologies developed here in Aotearoa. So proposals should target novel components that address key challenges in space systems. And these can include, but they're certainly not limited. I know a lot of you have great ideas. Propulsion systems, power systems, thermal control, materials and structures, avionics and software, sensors and payloads, environmental technologies. So it's pretty broad, I think, on the last one, but each challenge really gets to the focus of each government department and maybe not the entirety of their department, but areas of the department and things that are important to them, things that they need, things that they're working on right now. So it'd be fantastic to show, I guess, what the domestic space sector can do in terms of addressing those challenges in a more effective way. Okay, so I think you probably already know how to apply, but so we'll go through it anyway. So if you go onto the MB's Kiwi Space Activator webpage, and again, you can just put in Kiwi Space Activator into Google and it should come up. You'll find a downloadable Word doc for an application form. So when you are ready, please fill that out and send it into our New Zealand Space Agency inbox at nzspaceagency@nb.gov.nz, which I'm sure you'll all be capable of since you emailed that address to get into this meeting. So good for you. So key dates highlighting. So the round one's already opened 12th December, and it'll be closing just before midnight. Well, it'll be closing on the 1st of March. I think 11:59 p.m. 1st of March, which I think is a Sunday, but don't quote me on that. Round two is opening a little bit later, again, to give you a little bit more time, since that's a more sort of broad eligibility of cost. So that'll be 1st of April, and that will close on the 25th of May. And the assessors, though we haven't selected them yet, will be sourced from across MB and across the participating government agencies. And it will run in a very similar manner as the Catalyst program. So I think particularly the universities and some companies, I know that you'll be familiar with the 3 different Catalyst funds that we've run for space with Australia, with NASA, and with DLR in Germany. So we're very much modeled the application forms, the assessments on what we know sort of works, which is the Catalyst fund. Obviously, we've changed it a little bit around because it has more of a focus on commercialization than it does science for science sake. But that's, I guess, yeah. If you're familiar with that, you'll be familiar with this. Okay, and the assessment criteria. So what are we looking for? What makes for a good application? So you'll see on the website and you'll see in the application form the sort of the breakdown of the different qualities we're looking for in an application. So top of the list is technical merit and feasibility. Again, not that dissimilar to a Catalyst application. We want you to describe the quality of your technology, the soundness of the methodology, and the likelihood of a successful demonstration. I think it's probably pretty straightforward, but again, if you have any questions, let us know. Oh yeah, so technical merit and feasibility will account for 35% of your score. Commercialization potential. So describe as best you can the pathway to market or operational employment. So that will account for 25%. So how best you contribute to your chosen government challenge. So describe, if applicable, how your technology demonstration would address one of the 5 challenges. You can choose to address more than one challenge in your application if you're feeling confident, but no additional points would be given if you do more than one, or if you choose to address more than one challenge. So that will account for 15% of your score. So the use of a New Zealand platform. Again, you don't have to go with a New Zealand platform. You know, we imagine sort of a ride share with SpaceX, totally fine. But again, because this is about supporting the domestic sector, it would be great if we saw you flying on one of the payloads here in New Zealand. So the use of a New Zealand platform will account for 10%. So in your application, if you can go with a New Zealand platform, please provide details of your technology demonstration, or which a New Zealand-based platform you'll use, whether it's an orbital vehicle like an Electron, a high-altitude platform, or like a Dawn Aurora, or a Kia Atmos, or even an aircraft flight. We supported a project called Rungawai, which is about putting sensors on Air New Zealand commercial flights, for example. So if you're using an international platform, that is still allowed. However, you will not be given any additional points in this part of the assessment. And finally, co-funding strength. So we want you to describe the level and certainty of your co-funding contributions beyond the minimum requirement, of course. So if you have government grants on things, they are allowed. However, a weighting will be given to those that can identify the involvement of private investment. And again, it's going back to the commercialization objective that we have with this. So round 2, in-kind contributions are allowed. However, again, cash is king. Cash will be considered more favorably. Additionally, more weight will be given to applicants that can demonstrate that they have more than the minimum 30% co-funding requirement. So that's how you make a great looking application in our eyes.